present the work that I've done during my thesis at the LPS laboratory of Orsay, where I study the charged wave material with current and using the X-ray microdiffraction tool at ID1. So I'll try to go fast on the introduction so I don't waste too much time. So the charged wave phase transition was first predicted by Herbeck Froelich and Rudolf Peyers a long time ago. So we take a simple model, a 1D chain of atoms above the transition temperature. You get a more or less constant electronic energy. And if you take a simple tight binding model, you will see that the electronic bond is in cosine form. And if you look at the process to create an electron-hole pair near the Fermi surface, this costs a very small amount of energy. And it's the fact that it costs a very small amount of energy that will induce a peak in the electronic susceptibility at the wave vector 2kF. And this wave vector will be the charged wave vector. So the peak in this electronic susceptibility will induce a renormalization of the phonon spectrum. And so if you take a simple acoustic phonon branch at high temperature, and as you go down in temperature, you see that there is a softening of the phonon at the wave vector 2kF. And so this is observed experimentally many times, for example, in inelastic neutron scattering. Here you can clearly see the softening in the acoustic branch. And what does it mean? So you take your 1D chain of atoms, and at a high temperature, you will have this phonon at 2kF vibrating. But as you go down in temperatures, the phonon will get slower and slower. And when you reach the transition temperatures, the phonon frequency will be 0. So the phonon will freeze, and you will get a new periodicity inside the atomic lattice. So the periodicity can be commensurate regarding the original periodicity of the atomic lattice, but it can also be incommensurate, so meaning that the charged wave deformation wavelength can not be a fraction of the original lattice parameter. And this is the kind of charged wave material that we study because something interesting happened when we put current in this material. So when we put current in this material, this is what we observe, a simple current voltage measurement. You see that at low current, you get a linear behavior, but as you go to higher current, you see that it starts to be non-linear. So if you make the derivative of this curve, it's even more clear to be seen. So you look at the differential resistivity, and you see that at a threshold electric current in the sample, you get a drop of the differential resistivity. This is observed in many incommensurate charged wave material. For example, here in niobium triselenite, maybe I take a pointer. Here in niobium triselenite, here also in terbium tritellurite, where you can clearly see the drop. And here also in the blue bronze, where you can see the linear part of the current voltage curve and the very strong non-linear part. So we say that in the linear part, the charged wave doesn't contribute to the current, and in the non-linear part, the charged wave contributes. But the question is how? And to study what happened to the charged wave when we put current, we use X-ray microdiffraction to observe the charged wave deformation. So we study the quasi-1D material niobium triselenite, which is a material made of 3 types of quasi-1D chain of atom along the b-axis. And when you go to low temperature, you will have a charged wave in one of these atomic chain along the b direction. So this is a picture of the sample in the CRIASTA of ID1. And you can see the sample just here, a very, very thin wire that we put on a sapphire, and then we make a 4 gold contact with some indium to make an in situ current voltage measurement. So this is a picture of the sample on optical microscope. So it's a very, very thin wire of millimeter long, but only tens of micrometer in width and only 3 micrometers in thickness. And the charged wave appear along the very long direction. And if you make a simple resistivity as a function of temperature measurement in this kind of material, you see that there is 2 charged wave transition, one at 144K and the other one at 55K. But during the experiment at ID1, we only stayed below the first transition, but well above the second one. So we only see 1 charged wave in the material. And in this material, there is the charged wave nonlinear current that is observed. So then, to study the charged wave in X-ray diffraction, so if you look at high temperature, you will have the simple model of 1D atomic chain. You will have the Bragg peak. And as you go down in temperature, you will have the charged wave distortion in the atomic lattice, and you will have new superstructure satellite peak around each of the Bragg peak. And this satellite peak will be at a distance given by the charged wave vector. So this is observed, for example, here in an experiment that we did at Beamline Crystal at Synchroton Soleil, where you can clearly see the Bragg peaks and the two very small charge D-wave satellites that are very more weak than the Bragg peak in intensity, and that are around each of the Bragg peaks. So then we went to ID1 Beamline at the EUSRF synchrotron, and we study using microdiffraction on niobium triselenide. So this is a picture on optical microscope of the middle of the sample that we use. So it's very, very long along the horizontal direction. There is a surface step on the sample, but what is more interesting is that we perform a focused ion beam cut inside the sample, so a hole to the whole sample. And so when we will put current in the sample from left to right, the current will only flow in the upper part of the sample. And in this way, we can study on the same sample a charge D-wave with current and directly compare with a charge D-wave without current below the thick cut, because here it's blocked here. So the current cannot flow in the lower part. So this is a schematic of the sample. The B-axis, which is the charge D-wave direction, we make 4 gold contacts on the sample to make a current voltage measurement in situ during the experiment. And we saw the differential resistivity of the sample, and we clearly see the threshold current at 0.5 milliamp. Then we use a Fresnel zone plate, which will focalize the beam, the X-ray beam on the sample with a beam area of 200 by 300 nanometers, so much, much smaller than the sample dimension. And we measure the charge D-wave satellite peak 010 plus QCDW, where QCDW is a charge D-wave wave vector. And we measure also the Bragg peak 020, because we needed to compare both of them when we put the current. Then we measure SAT on the 2D detector, and we move the Fresnel zone plate to move the beam on the sample and study the charge D-wave deformation as a function of position on the sample. We did that on this area of 80 by 50 micrometer, and to study the upper part and the lower part of the sample. And we did a rocking curve at each position of the sample to have the full information in reciprocal space. So what type of information can we get from that? So if we look just at the centroid of the beam, we directly get the wave vector of the reflection that we measure. We get that for the Bragg peak and for the charge D-wave satellite. So we need to compare both, because the problem is the charge D-wave satellite is not only QCDW, but it's QCDW plus a Bragg peak. So if there is crystal deformation, then it will be also visible on the charge D-wave satellite. So we need to make sure that if something happened with current, it's only visible on the satellite and not on the 020 Bragg peak. So this is the longitudinal direction, so the charge D-wave direction at equilibrium. We see that there is some crystal deformation near the focus ion beam cut and also near the surface of the sample. This is the transverse direction, so along Y. Unfortunately, there was too much deformation on the crystal lattice, so we couldn't really see what's happening on the charge D-wave in this direction. And finally, the last transverse direction, so along Z, where you can clearly see that the map for the Bragg peak and the charge D-wave satellite are very different. So first, what do we expect to see when we put current in the charge D-wave material? So the charge D-wave, we describe it by the simple cosine form, where the 2kF is the charge D-wave wave vector when we put no current, and we put all the deformation in this phase term. And that what we measure experimentally is the variation of the position of the charge D-wave satellite peak as a function of current. And this is directly related to the gradient of this phase. And why I'm talking about that is because there is this phase is very well known in the literature, and there is a free energy expression for this phase, which seems complicated, but it's actually very simple. It's just an elastic cost if the charge D-wave there is a deformation of the charge D-wave, but also a coupling of the electrical potential with the longitudinal deformation of the charge D-wave, but only the longitudinal deformation. So in longitudinal, if we get a deformation in longitudinal, so non-zero derivative of the phase along X, it will cost energy because of this elastic term, but it can also decrease the total energy because it's coupled to the electric field. And so this is the Bragg peak in longitudinal at -1 milliamp and the satellite peak at -1 milliamp. The problem is there was too much deformation on the sample, on the crystal, so it was hard to see what was happening. So what we did is we selected one region above the focus ion beam cut, which is more or less homogeneous, one region below the thick cut where there is no current, and we make the average as a function of current. And you can see that above the thick cut, here in red, there is a longitudinal deformation, and below the field cut where there is no current in blue, there is no deformation. And this was observed many times, for example, here in an experiment that we did at the free electron laser LCLS, but also it was observed a long time ago by Rekar. So there is a longitudinal deformation on the charged wave when we put the current. But next, what was very surprising is that we observe a transverse charged wave deformation. So this is the transverse deformation along Z that we observe. And this is the map of the transverse deformation for different currents. And you can clearly see that something is happening only in the upper part of the sample where there is current, but nothing is happening in the lower part where there is no current. And what is more interesting is that the effect is reversed when we inverse the sign of the current. So between 1 and -1, it's the inverse. So it's clearly not a heating of the charged wave by the current. Otherwise, the two maps should be the same. So to understand why there is this transverse charged wave deformation, what we did is that since the map was more or less homogeneous along the x direction, we made the average of this map along x. And this is what we get. So it was 0.6 milliamp, 1 milliamp, back to 0, minus 0.15, minus 0.6, and finally -1. And you can clearly see that you have the opposite behavior between -1 milliamp and +1 milliamp. It's not symmetric, but we don't expect it to be exactly symmetric. The field cut is not symmetric between left and right. And we were closer to the left electrical contact than to the right electrical contact. But then we need to understand why this is happening. So the question is, so if we compare the Bragg peak deformation in transverse and the charged wave satellite peak, we clearly see that there is no deformation on the Bragg peak. There's not the same deformation on the Bragg peak. So it's clearly something due only to the charged wave itself. But why this is happening? If we look back at the free energy expression that I gave before, the transverse deformation, there is only this term. And so a transverse deformation only increases the total free energy. So it shouldn't happen actually under current. So it wasn't clear for us why this was happening. So what we did is that we made a phase reconstruction of the charged wave. So here we have the map of the charged wave transverse deformation averaged along the horizontal direction. And this is actually directly the derivative of the phase along Z. So I just did an integration to get back the phase as a function of Z. And this is what we get. So the phase along the Z direction for different current at 0.6 milliamp, 1 milliamp, back to 0, minus 0.15, minus 0.6, and finally -1. You see that below the field cut, here where there is no current, nothing much is happening. But above the field cut, there is a clear deformation, which was already visible here on the transverse deformation. But what is more interesting is that I fixed the phase to be 0 at the field cut position, but I fixed nothing on the upper part of the sample. But still, all the curves are coming more or less at the same value of the phase at the upper part of the sample. And this was a way for us that, to understand that there was actually a pinning of the charged wave phase at the upper part of the sample. And this is why the charged wave had this deformation. So first, I will show you some 2D phase reconstruction that I did to understand that. So I reconstructed the phase in 2D, so without making the average along the X direction. And this is what I did. So this is a sketch of the charged wave. So I increase the charged wave wavelength. The charged wave wavelength should be only a few angstrom. So here it's a 50 micrometer. So I just increase it to observe the deformation. So at 0.6 milliamp, 1 milliamp, back to 0, minus 0.15, minus 0.6, and -1. So what is happening actually? So when we put current in the charged wave material, the charged wave will try to have the longitudinal deformation along the X direction, because it was observed in this experiment, also in several experiments. So we are sure that there is this compression of the charged wave along X. The problem is, since the phase is pinned, since the charged wave is blocked at the surface and at the field cut, the charged wave cannot do this compression without also adding this shear effect near the sample border. And this is why we observe this transverse deformation. And we couldn't have observed that without the micro-diffraction tool. If you take a big beam, you wouldn't observe that. You would just observe a peak that is broadening in the Z direction. So we needed the micro-diffraction tool. So finally, I will go a bit fast on, we use surface spinning that we just show to understand some old results from the literature. So in the literature, people measure the differential resistivity and they measure the threshold electric field as a function of the sample dimension. So this is the schematic of the sample, the charge wave direction, the current direction. And so people measure the threshold electric field as a function of length of the sample, which is actually the distance between the electrical contact, and also the cross-section of the sample. And what we did is that we took a very well-known phase equation of the charge wave phase that is coming actually from the free energy expression. And we just added surface spinning. And we solve for the phase. And then we use a model to find the threshold electric field as a function of the electric of the size of the sample. And we were able to fit some experimental data. So here, it's a fit of the experimental data of the threshold electric field as a function of distance between the contact. And the fit works rather well. This is a fit of the threshold voltage as a function of distance between electrical contact. And what was even more interesting for us is that it works also to fit the threshold electric field as a function of cross-section of the sample. So surface spinning could be a way to understand this very old experiment of threshold as a function of sample dimension. And so, yeah, there was a lot of people that participate on this work. So thank you for listening. If you have any question.
Thank you very much, Evan, also for the presentation of the team. Yeah, other question concerning this charge density wave physics and eventual imaging methods.
I have a question.
Yes, Austin.
A long time ago, we did similar experiments, and at the time we found that the charge density wave materials can be very, very sensitive to radiation damage.
Yeah, it's okay.
And we found that we actually, by illuminating a small spot on the sample, we create a defect which then acts as a pinning center and which leads to ejection and re-injection of the sliding charge density wave current into normal current. Have you observed similar things, and can your pinning eventually be ascribed to such a problem?
Yeah, so I think you talk about an article with Pierre Monceau as well.
Yes.
I think I read that. Yeah. So actually, the people that I worked with, so David and Vincent, they knew well this problem of irradiation. So for example, on terbium tritelluride, they made an experiment, same X-ray microdiffraction, but then they didn't use enough filter, and they saw that they were creating a hole on the sample. It's not on the sample, but on the charge wave was getting destroyed by the X-ray beam. So for niobium triselenite, it's a bit more robust. Even at LCLS, it was more or less fine. There was not too much irradiation defect. And you can still observe if the intensity of the charge wave satellite peak is decreasing as a function of time. And here it wasn't the case, so I don't think there was any much irradiation.
Thanks.
But with ABS, it will be worse.
And with microfocusing, of course, it gets a lot worse.
Yeah.
So potentially, there is a point here to try full field imaging where the radiation density, the power density is a lot lower, and you illuminate the whole sample.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If there is no further question, we would just be in time for the coffee break.